Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt, live in the Bourbon Life studios tonight. Matt, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really well. We are back in the Bourbon Life studios. And do you know what day today is?
Today is the summer solstice.
It is.
Yeah.
Today is the summer solstice. We were recording on the longest day of the year, which fittingly in 2021 is a Monday.
And it's the darkest day of the summer so far since we've had thunderstorms.
Yeah, no, this is, yeah. It's been raining all day here in central Kentucky. I don't think we've seen the sunshine.
No, sir. Not at all. Not at all.
It's rumored to be the summer solstice. But always a favorite day of the year of mine.
Yeah. It gives you a longer time to get out. Well, of course, today you couldn't get out and train or ride your bike or run or do anything, but I'm sure usually you do. Or is there any weird ritual that you do? You like dance around a bonfire or anything to celebrate the summer solstice? You know, just nothing.
No, we'll say that for the postcast, maybe.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, we don't have any Barrell Society members' birthdays today. I just want to throw that out there so people don't think I forgot. All right. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. But then I also want to thank our sponsors, the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky. They're making some great food. Check them out online. thestavekentucky.com, also on Instagram and Facebook. Chef Kyle Klatka out there is just making some great stuff. So pay them a visit if you're on the Bourbon Trail. They're right there between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, conveniently located on the banks of Glens Creek. So check those guys out and you won't be sorry that you did. They got great bourbon selection out there as well. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon, our sponsor as well. We appreciate everything that they're doing. We appreciate their support, and Ari Sussman, their master blender up there, just doing a great job. So we're really thankful for them. Check them out as well at 3chordbourbon.com and Instagram at 3Chord Bourbon. With that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Yeah, let's waste no time. Let's get right down to it. We have joining us one of our first repeat guests here.
That's right.
So Mr. Tripp Stimson, welcome back. And also Joe Beatrice, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast. And Tripp is the chief whiskey scientist and chief of distillery operations, and Joe is the founder of Stellum Spirits. So gentlemen, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you back, Tripp.
It's great to be back. It's been nearly a year now, and a lot's happened. We're excited to talk about all this stuff.
A whole pandemic since you've been here. So yeah, welcome back.
It's funny that not a lot has happened in a year or so. I mean, really not much to catch up on, I guess. What are you guys?
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't really have a whole lot to talk about with you guys, right? I mean, there's not that much going on. So, well, guys, we usually like to start and jump in with the conversation, but before we do that, we forget, and we're trying to do our best to always talk about the whiskey that we're drinking first, so everybody knows what we got poured up. So I thought we'd start with the bourbon. It's funny to say that this is the lower proof of the two, but that's what we got poured up. So Tripp, Joe, either one of you guys want to kind of tell us a little bit about what this bourbon is?
So we'll look at Stellum Bourbon. We'll start with that one. And
yes,
Stellum Bourbon it's a unique approach to blending that it took us about 1.5 to 2 years or so to really put this together. And what we really wanted to do is focus on something that we created from scratch. You know, the story has been told many times about somebody's grandfather's recipe or something that was made from a certain varietal of grain or a certain way of distillation, and we wanted to tell a little bit different story with this particular product. And in doing so, spent that 1.5 to probably 2 years putting together unique blends of different types of bourbons, really focusing on sort of the Indiana high rye mash bill profiles, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But what we wanted to do with Stellum is create something that was that we could reproduce. As we talked about a year ago when I came on, we talked a lot about barrel and how each batch is different, each batch is unique. What we're doing with Stellum is we wanted to focus on a product that was something that we could reproduce ongoing and make a really solid blend of bourbon. So what you're tasting now is going to be mainly about 85% of this blend is going to be between the two high rye mash bills from Indiana, the 36%, and then the 21%, which is the one that most people are familiar with. In addition to that, we're going to take those high rye qualities and then sort of round those out with the lesser known 99% bourbon mash bill that also comes out of Indiana. And the interesting part, that 99% corn mash bill typically gets sort of a raw shake, I think, when people look at it for what it is. It tends to be a very linear product, a very straightforward corn-based product. But when put with the right other products, you get a really nice rounded bourbon product that cornbread from the 99% corn really adds to the opulence from the two high rye bourbons. And I think you'll see that. In addition to both of those, there's also a little bit of Tennessee and a little bit of Kentucky in with that. So I'll stop rambling and let you guys have a sip and we can talk about it.
All right. That sounds good. Well, Matt, real quick, what are you picking up on the nose on this one before we jump in? I've already been sipping on it, but I don't want to jump too far ahead.
So the first thing that I really got on the nose was Cracker Jack.
Interesting. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah. Corn.
Like a caramel corn. It really took me back to that being a kid and opening up a box of Cracker Jack right off there. And then the more I'm smelling at it, I'm picking up more of that rye coming through. It's got a nice little, that rye spice on the nose, a little bit of herbal, like something a little minty as well. A little bit of mint coming through on the nose, but that caramel corn, the Cracker Jack is really nice. Yeah,
I'm picking up, and I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying, that Cracker Jack. I get kind of a brown sugary sweetness coming off of the nose to me on this one. So Tripp, Joe, are we close?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Macadamia nut is one of the things that really, and that's very close to what you're, that Cracker Jack, the toffee, caramel corn,
Gotcha.
That stuff. I think that's all in there. Yeah. There's a little bit of apple, marshmallow, I think, in there.
Tripp, what about you? It's funny, Tripp, because I was listening to the old episode and that we did last year, and we went through the entire first session, and Matt and I were talking about what we picked up and what we tasted, and I never asked you. I was like, I never asked you what you picked up on the nose or what you tasted, and I was like, I'm not going to make the same mistake, so I'm definitely going to ask Tripp. What do you pick up on this when you nose it?
Well, and I think to that point, Mark, I like it better when you guys talk about what you guys taste beforehand, simply because we spend hours going through tasting all these different samples and putting these blends together. And I don't want to sit here and tell you how you should taste things or what you should taste, because then I'm swaying you toward the way that I taste things. So there's nothing wrong with that. But in this particular bourbon, I do get the apple, as Joe was saying, but it's more of a baked apple, sort of a little bit of cinnamon, and then there's a almost a sugary sweetness.
Yeah, I definitely, that was a thing that struck me as soon as I first opened the bottle and poured it and let it set for just a couple minutes. That was the really first thing that jumped out to me, was just that sugary, and to me it came across as a brown sugar kind of flavor.
Yep.
But that's just
absolutely,
it just absolutely jumped out at me. So now it's funny you're talking about apples, and now I'm thinking of like a strudel or an apple crumble, or something. Matt's talking Cracker Jacks and cinnamon. So now we got like an
apple strudel going on here.
It's not a raw apple; it's a baked apple. I mean, we spend a lot of time parsing those things when we're talking about it. It's it's like what kind of baked apple is it? Is sort of where we go next. Also, there's a little bit of pepper. Like there's a black pepper sort of in the mid palate on this. that is just that you get a lot of times, but I think it just sits there nicely and balances it.
Yeah. I agree with that. Definitely. So guys, we talked a little bit about the nose on this one. We've got some information about what this is. So this is a blend then of 3 Indiana bourbons, a Kentucky, and a Tennessee. Is that right? 5 different.
That's correct.
Okay. So I wanted to make sure I had that right. And it's funny because this is the one we started out with. And, I generally tend to start with the lower proof. So this one is the lower proof of the two, but we're talking about 114.98 proof on this one. So this is cask strength. So what kind of drove that decision in terms of, hey, we're gonna decide to put this out at cask strength?
Well, everything that we do with Stellum and also with Barrell Craft Spirits is cask strength.
Okay.
And it flows back from sort of one of the core tenets of the company is that we're going to do everything at cask strength. I mean, the only water we have in our place is for drinking, really. And we tend to drink a lot of water because it's so hot where, but it's and part of that is I tasted whiskey from a barrel early on in my life and thought it was spectacular, and so as we were developing the sort of the core of the product, that was one of the things that we wanted to do. And when we first started it, there weren't that many cask strength products. And so now you're seeing a lot more, but it's really driven by the flavor. I mean, that's really where it comes from. But the other thing I'd say about the proof on this is when we first blended it, and we don't proof it until we're down the road, usually until we're finished. I thought this was going to be a lot less proof. This drinks like a 108, 107 proof bourbon to me,
Right.
Which is a little bit, it's deceptive because it goes down really easy.
Yeah, it's like your dog. It's a ninja, right? It's the bourbon ninja. It's going to sneak up on you, and before you know it,
you never hear my dog coming. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So guys, Joe, you kind of said something there about when you first tasted it. You tasted, years ago. So let's kind of talk about you guys. I know Tripp, we've talked about you before, so we don't need to do that. I'm just kidding. We definitely want to do that. We want our listeners to hear your story. But Joe, we haven't had you on the show before, so we definitely want to get kind of your background, where you came from, how in the world you decided to get into the world of wonderful world of whiskey, and how that all came about.
Oh, so you want a yes/no answer?
And if you can do that in 90 seconds, no, I'm just kidding.
I live in Kentucky now. We live down here. We moved down 4 years ago. Prior to that, when we started the company, I was commuting from New York. I had started a business in the internet early on in the late 80s, early 90s, and we were part of the new internet movement in New York. And along the way, we also had an advertising agency that then we sort of got full-time on the internet. We did web application development, online advertising, online marketing, big scale integration and stuff. But along the way, we always had a spirits vertical. So I came to Kentucky, I gotta say, it was mid-late 80s, and fell in love with Louisville, and made friends and liked it here, and had a really nice career doing lots of other stuff. And fast forward, I won't bore you with all the other stuff going on, but fast forward 9 years ago, my wife and I were at a distillery and in upstate New York, and I just had this moment where, in the same way I thought the internet is a place for me to be, I said, I need to come back and do this. And it was that kind of an inspiration. And in that moment, we talked it over, and I decided that I wanted to do this. And the first thought was, let's build a distillery, which lasted about a week.
Yeah,
it's a little capital intensive, and didn't have the expertise needed, and also it was a very interesting moment. If you go back in time to 2012, 2013, bourbon was really bourbon's always been big, but it hadn't had the explosive growth until after that. And we were in the market at the right time. And sort of the core of it was I decided I didn't want to do a distillery, and knew that I had a good palate, made beer my whole life, and decided that we wanted to start a company where we focused on the flavor and the blending. So the core of it was that it was all going to be cask strength. Every batch was going to be unique, and everything was a limited release. And that was important because really having plugged into like consumer dynamics my whole life, people really like to know what's new and what's different. And
Right.
so we wanted people to think what's new, what's different, but we wanted them to think about our brand. And so it started 1 year after that moment. I blended the first batch, and we bottled it and sold it. And then shortly after that, I met Tripp, and we've been working together ever since. So we blended pretty much everything together, and since then. And we also have it's like been there almost. Is it 2 years?
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
So we
Yeah, see, COVID, just that whole year just doesn't count anymore. So we just wipe that out and say, no, it's only been 1 year, right?
it's amazing how humans have no capacity to remember pain. So it just disappears. Anyway, so Nick joined us almost 2 years ago, and she joined the blending team shortly after, and she's been a great addition. So, between there's the three of us, and Will Schrager sometimes is involved in the blending, but it's really we do all of it. It's the best job in the world. What can I say?
No, that's great. And just so everybody know, I mean, I think I kind of assumed that everybody knew that you all started, or Joe, that you started Barrell Craft Spirits, and that's where Tripp and you guys really, that was your first brand. That's what you guys have become known for. I'm assuming that everybody listening knows that, but I thought I better just throw that in there just so everybody knows, because we're talking about Stellum Spirits this time, which is your new brand. So I figured I'd maybe clarify that just for everybody, people out there that may not realize that. So now that I got that out of the way, so Tripp, give us a synopsis of your background and how you got into the industry, and then how you got together with Joe at Barrell Craft.
Okay, so I've actually been in the spirit space now for going on 18 years. Managed to get in directly after college. I was 23 years old. Was recruited by Brown-Forman and was a research and development scientist for them for over 9 years.
Wait a minute, Tripp, you got to say during spring break. Come on, you got to say that.
You got to tell the story, because it's a great story.
The whole story. Okay, the whole story.
Tell us the story. We love it.
So I just graduated college, and I'm sitting on the beach in Daytona Beach with my sister, drinking Corona, chatting about who knows what. And my phone rings, and it was Brown-Forman's Human Resources Department. They were asking if I could do a phone interview for a position that they had available. And of course, at the time, it was not the best time for me to do that. So
sure, let's do it.
We decided the next morning was a more opportune time. So had the phone call the next morning, and they asked if I could come up to Louisville, Kentucky for an in-person interview, which I did, and went through the interview process. And at 23 years old, was offered a job to work for one of the largest spirits producers in the space. So had no real idea what that meant for me at the time, but was eager to find out. So I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and started work with Brown-Forman. Worked in several different capacities for them as a chemist and microbiologist and researcher, and worked in sort of different distillery settings and focused on different distillery sciences, and really got to be a part of bourbon distillation, yeasting, fermentation, all the distillery sciences in bourbon and whiskey, as well as tequila and in wines as well. In fast forward to the 2012, 2013 timeframe that Joe was referencing earlier, just before this, big explosion into the bourbon world, I saw an opportunity to sort of leverage my experiences with some of the would-be craft distillers and help really paint the true picture of what opening a distillery means, what designing and operating a distillery and creating products, what that really looks like, and not just the sort of the fairy tale that had been passed around from time to time.
Right.
And through that process was working at a distillery in Crestwood, Kentucky, which is where I met Joe. And when Joe and I first had one of our first conversations was about building a distillery. And when he said exactly what he said tonight, where he thought about building a distillery for about a week and realized that wasn't necessarily the route to go. It's like, wow, this guy's, he's done his homework. He really understands the approach to this, because so many times I would talk myself out of more business than I would talk myself into, because building a distillery and going that route is very capital intensive, labor intensive. It requires a certain skill set that wasn't necessarily readily available at the time. And so anyway, Joe and I hit it off at that point and have been blending barrel together all these years and recently Stellum.
Trey, let me just add something to that, because it was, even after we decided that, and it was, at the beginning, we still had plans up until fairly recently to build out the distillery. And what happened, the decision, it was really in the last, again, it could have been 6 months ago, 3 years at this point. So time is a difficult concept for me. We had our hands full with blending so much. We like it so much. And we made this conscious decision. We do some distillation, small stuff, which we do experiments and things. But we made this decision, which is, essentially building a distillery. People don't think of it this way because, as Tripp was saying, it's such a romantic view of what a distillery is. You're building a factory. I mean, you're really making a factory. That it's not that sexy. And so you got to make a factory, and we really felt like where the value that we're adding to the equation is our ability to put things together and put them in a bottle. And we made this conscious decision that we decided that again, to stay with what we're doing, because we've just had such huge growth.
Sure. Yeah.
That makes sense. Now, Tripp, is it true? Well, first of all, I think I remember correctly, you're from Tennessee originally, right? But we've decided that's correct, not to hold that against you or anything. So, but then also, but you'd wanted to go to med school, right? Is that right? If I remember correctly, at some point?
Originally, that was the plan. Yes.
That was the plan. So you're like a big chemical or biochemistry guy and just like went into the world of bourbon. That's a really cool story. I love that.
Yeah, I started out degrees in biochemistry, molecular biology, and was going down the medical school path, and took the MCAT several times. And as far as I was concerned, that was a done deal. And an opportunity showed up, and thought, well, let me try this spirits space out and see if I like it, and if not, I can always go back to medical school. And I mean, we're pushing 18 years now, and still going. So
yeah,
it's got to be a pretty good situation when your fallback is med school. You did well for yourself.
That's a great point, Matt.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, Joe, it seems like I think I saw somewhere or read somewhere that you're are you like a mountaineer, a mountain climbing guy, an ice guy? Is that true?
Yeah, I love being outside, which is why I lived in New York. And that was where you play the laugh track.
No, yeah, I was just like, wait a second, New York and
the Adirondacks have great climbing and outdoors in New York.
There you go.
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, so the White Mountains are really second nature to me. But I love being outside. I've done a fair amount of mountaineering and ice climbing in my day, and it was maybe 10 years ago at this point where I was climbing in Calgary, and it was a pretty hairy, 1,000-foot cliff peak. It was all day long. It was a dozen pitches. And I was climbing with a friend of mine who I've climbed a lot with, and we were standing there, and we were on the second to last one. There's a thunderstorm rolling in. It's really thin protection. And I looked at him and I said, I think I'm going to head back into gentleman climbing at this point. It was a little bit. So that was then. But it's still great to get out there and do these things.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Matt's done his fair share of rock climbing and adventure stuff as well. So that's pretty cool. It seems like a common thread between, for a lot of people in the industry. It's kind of funny. I don't know if it's just the adventure of it all, and that thrill seeking, or that need for a new challenge. Maybe that's what draws people to the bourbon world. I'm not sure, but it's kind of unique to see that. So, all right, guys, we'll tell you what, we're actually at the end of round one. Since we're drinking two different things tonight, we're going to save our thoughts on the palate and the note or the finish on this bourbon for the second round. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to get a word from our sponsor, and we'll be back with more with Tripp Stimson and Joe Beatrice from Stellum Spirits in just a minute. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. When you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for round two of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there?
Oh, good, Mark. I'm good. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm strapped in and looking forward to session, round, period, shift number 2 here.
Whatever you want to call it, right?
That's
Whatever.
right.
Well, let's jump back in. We'll tell everybody who we have with us, just in case people.
Oh, that's right.
Us,
We've got Tripp Stimson and Joe Beatrice of Stellum Spirits joining us this evening on the show. So a great show so far.
Definitely.
And before we get into our big questions here, we are going to talk. Let's wrap. Should we go on this bourbon, do some tasting notes?
Yeah, let's jump back
talk
in
a little bit more about
let's
the
jump
Stellum
back in.
bourbon.
We talked about the nose quite a bit. Let's talk about the palate, because we're tasting two things tonight. So we're kind of mixing it up a little bit, which is great. So Matt, what do you get when you're tasting this? What are you picking up on the palate on it?
So going back to the nose, the longer it's been in the glass here, more of that marshmallow and some of that nougat is coming out, the sweetness on the nose. But the palate is right up my alley. Just a really great spice, nice black peppercorn, good little bit of like an herbal minty flavor and lots of honey. I pick up like a really nice sweetness right at the touch, and then it's really got that nice peppery finish. And Joe, you were talking about like a really nice black pepper mid palate. I picked that up absolutely. I love it. It's the high rise that is in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, Matt's a big rye fan, so there's no doubt about. I figured he was going to really enjoy this one. Matt, it's funny because when we were over at Prohibition and you were tasting some of their stuff, and he had a high rye mash bill that was MGP, and you mentioned that you were actually picking up like almost like a jalapeno, like that's kind of a spicy pepper on the palate. And I pick up the pepper, but like a black peppercorn, but it almost transitions into a little bit of a spiciness. It's kind of like not like it's burning my tongue up, but it's just kind of got that after effect almost of a jalapeno to me. So I don't know if that's just stuck in my mind or what, but interesting, huh? Guys, Tripp and Joe are looking like I'm not quite sure about that.
No. I think that you're really It's like, for me, it translates as cayenne.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a little bit hot, but it's not. It doesn't have that. It's not as fleshy a flavor.
Yeah, no,
like a jalapeno's got like a really like a more fresh kind of like juicy flavor to it. I don't know if that's a great way to describe it, but I can see what you're saying, Joe, with the cayenne being a little bit more of like just a well-rounded heat to it without that fresh garden taste.
Yeah, but it's just funny because I get that peppercorn and then it kind of transitions into something that's even a little spicier to me than just what a black peppercorn would be. So that's kind of what I pick up on that one. What about the finish, Matt? What do you get?
Really, really nice long finish. That peppercorn comes through, and I pick up some of that rye. The rye especially is coming through. I'm getting like a little bit of caraway, a little bit of cardamom on the back end as well with it, and just a nice peppery sweetness. It really just to me is like a peppercorn medley.
Yeah.
Well, now of all
Tripp,
different kinds.
I know that I think that I read somewhere the Indiana and the Kentucky and the Tennessee barrels in this are actually, I guess, a little bit older than the Indiana. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we got a touch of 16-year-old, which provides a little bit of that fruit that you're going to get there toward the end of it. At least I get that baked apple, a little bit of cinnamon. It kind of carries through to the end of the finish. That sweet honey.
Yeah.
Attribute a lot of that toward that 16-year-old Tennessee bourbon.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. If there's I know you're not going to tell us the ages, but I know when we were talking last year with the barrel stuff, I think the batch 20 that we had, we were looking at like 10 to 14-year-olds, some of the barrels that had been blended into that. So I was curious to know when I read about this bourbon has some older barrel mixed in, just a touch of it, how old, what kind of range we're looking at there. But, I guess I get a little bit of a tannic finish, a little bit of a kind of a drying finish on the end of this. I don't know, Matt, if you pick that up, or if Joe, Tripp, if you guys see that, but it's not overwhelming. It's not something that makes me pucker from, like I want to get a drink of water or anything. But I do pick up a little bit of a kind of Matt, you call it the cloying effect. So I don't know if you're picking that up on this or not, but.
For me, I get honey. Like if you really like after all of that, and I think there is a dryness like right before the finish. Then like what I'm left with is like a real like nice clover nose or flavor on that honey. Yeah. I want to just mention one thing about the barrels. I mean, one of the things that when we age statement products, it's obviously the youngest barrel that's in there. But for us, since we're not driven by the age statement, like it doesn't, it is every bourbon at every age has different things to offer. And we don't think twice about taking older bourbon and putting it with younger bourbon because it's what gives it this layered richness in our products. And that's really baked into the way that we view the brand, which is we produce the best product we can with whatever it is that we're using, regardless of what we could do with it. I mean, we could save all the old barrels and release them at once, but we don't even really necessarily like old barrels on their own because they have properties that they've lost that the younger bourbons bring to the table.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talking about the brand, the bourbon and things. Let's talk about the brand itself, Stellum Spirits. So we talked earlier about barrel craft, and so Stellum is a new product, a new line, basically that you all started. I guess it was this year, right? In February, March, somewhere around there, maybe. Or
yeah, we released it in April. As Tripp said, we've been working on this product for a couple of years. But we really literally finalized the brand in December, January. The packaging, the label, the name, all of that. And we brought it to market very quickly, which is something that we can do and we do with all of our products, all of our releases. But what the driver of it was, bourbon has really changed in the last 10 years, last 8 years, 7 years. The profile of the drinker has really changed. It's inclusive. There's way more people drinking bourbon now than there were. It was a very narrow demographic. It was really skewed older and male, but you don't see that now. It is really expanded out and flattened out. So you have people coming to bourbon at a far younger age than they did in the past, and also not just coming to bourbon, but being more discerning in the palate, which is those factors really contributed to the design of this product, from the flavor and the ingredients, as well as the packaging and the positioning of it. And there's a Tripp mentioned it, I think, in the last segment, that we don't. There's no backstory. There's no recipe that was lost 100 years ago that was probably never even made. We're about the product that you see in the bottle and the transparency of what we do. And so there's a respect that we have for the drinker, which is we're not going to tell you a story that just isn't true. And I think that doesn't fly with anybody anymore. They know it's not true. They know it's a product that is for profit, and that we try to make the best product possible. But I think we try to do that now. We also, in response to sort of the old archetype of what a bourbon drinker was, we went with a far simpler package, very straightforward, and even that's even reflected in the flavor profile. It is well layered and nuanced. It's more approachable and a little bit simpler than some of the barrel products.
Gotcha. So when you decided you started the Stellum Spirits. So is it geared then towards a different market in your mind than what barrel craft is geared towards, or is it basically an appeal to everybody? How does that work?
The idea was always to have both products appeal to everybody.
Okay.
But we took into account that we wanted to really show that this was not. I don't like framing something in the negative here, but it was designed not to be what a lot of other products are, and we wanted to make it more accessible to people by just give it a try and see what you think, and if it's something that you like, hopefully you'll come back to it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And now I know, Tripp, when we talked last year about barrel, and we talked about the blending process. I mean, each batch that you guys do, I think you're up to batch 28, maybe something like that now, 27, 28?
We're wrapping up 30 right now.
30, okay. Well, I was off by a couple bit. I know, each batch was very unique. It was a blend based on what you guys wanted to do with that particular batch, something you were thinking about, or maybe the barrels you had that were just kind of driving that profile. But now Stellum is different. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Stellum is different in that fact. In order to create something that is intentionally the same, which is different from what we do with barrel craft spirits, it took quite a bit of planning, because we've got to look at what we have in stock, barrels that we can get our hands on, what we're going to have moving forward, and then how we can put a unique blend together utilizing all of those individual barrels, so that we're going to be able to continue to produce the best product that we can moving forward on a consistent basis, which is what we've done here. Again, we talked about the 36% high rye bourbon, the 21% high rye bourbon, and the corn, the 99% corn, all from Indiana, and then how the Tennessee and the Kentucky sort of round out that overall profile. We're able to create that. We're going to be able to create that product consistently moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cause that was going to be one of my next questions is, in terms of sourcing bourbon, I know, a lot of distilleries that come out and they just are sourcing, barrels, they run into situations where it's like, oh crap, we've got this product that we're making and now we can't make it because the barrels are different, that something's changed. Our product's not going to be the same. So with Stellum, it sounds like you've kind of planned ahead enough that you've got that potential issue worked out, or hopefully worked out, correct?
Yeah, I think we do. And then also too, we taste, Joe and Nick and Will and I taste so many of these different types of bourbons and, different barrels within the different mash bills within different areas of these warehouses to where we can find the nuanced flavors that we're after. Because, these barrels are going to be different proofs within each of the different barrels, driven by, where they are in the different rick houses. And so there's all these different variables. So by going through and tasting all of the different individual barrels that fall into each of these different mash bills that can come from different areas of the rick houses, we can really hone in on the certain congeners or the flavors that we're looking for, and then make sure that we can get that interaction right in the blend in the lab prior to going out to dumping the barrels and actually scaling everything up in our tank.
Okay. Yeah. Because that was one thing I was definitely going to ask, like I said, was that, it just seemed like it could be difficult, if you get in a position where you've got 5 different, mash bills, 5 different bourbons from 3 different states that you're blending together, and you're going for consistency. You obviously, with the goal of Stellum is to maintain that consistency. So that was the question I had was, will you be able to maintain that? It sounds like you guys got it figured out. So, all right, Matt, you want to?
In fact, something really interesting happened about a month ago where one of the lots, meaning the entry date of a set of barrels, when we tasted it, it was not in the profile we wanted. And so we went and substituted. We went back and found more barrels that tasted more in line with what we wanted, and we'll use those barrels for something different. And so we can also, by balancing different barrels from different places, there's a pro and a con to having such a diverse barrel set. One, it's complicated and takes time, but 2, we also can use certain elements of different barrels to highlight or downplay something that's in the blend. So that's sort of a technical part of what we spend a lot of time doing, which is why we can do it that way.
Yeah. So kind of following up on that, just so I'm clear and our listeners are clear. So are you looking then, when you're buying these barrels now, are you thinking, okay, these are barrels that we're looking for because this is going to be part of Stellum, and then we're looking for these barrels because this is what we want to do with barrel craft? I mean, have you kind of separated those two, or are you just getting barrels and then as you get them, you're saying these are going to go into the Stellum and these are going to go into barrel craft?
All of the above.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. It really is. It really is.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, it really is. Sometimes we find things that are interesting and we just say, "Oh, we don't know what we're going to do with this, but there's a place for it." And other ones, at this point, we also have a pretty good feel for how the different mash bills work together in different products. So
sure.
we know what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So Matt, final thoughts on the bourbon. I enjoyed it. So
yeah,
2 thumbs up.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. I'm so impressed, and Tripp gathered this last time we had you on the show, that your all's knowledge of barrels and taste profiles to be able to, especially for something like this, knowing that you're going to create a consistent product moving on when you've got 3 different mash bills, 5 different mash bills, 3 different states, all different ages, and to know how to do your blending and to make everything work. It's one thing to be the master distiller at a huge facility that creates one mash bill that becomes one product, and to know how to blend it to be consistent. But to do what you all are doing is just really impressive. I think it really goes to speak ages and show that your ability to blend is so honed in. I really enjoyed it. I think the bourbon was a big hit, and it's really great to see that you all are gonna. I love, of course, what you've been doing with Barrell, but it's fun to see as well that there's going to be something consistent coming out as well. I think that's probably been a good challenge for you, and I think the industry deserves it.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been a good challenge, but I think it also speaks to the diversity in palates that we all have. Meaning, Joe, myself, Nick Christensen, and Will Tragus, and we all taste things a little bit differently, and those conversations are really what create these products.
And I would say I would like to thank you also for saying that. I mean, we really do appreciate it, and it's really nice to hear. What we really like is when people like our products. Sure. It just feels really good because we put a lot into it, and we just we just want everybody to enjoy the products that we make. And
yeah, I'm going to make a motion that we change Tripp's title from Chief Whiskey Scientist to Chief Whiskey Mad Scientist. I don't know if we can, make that happen or not. So, because he's the mad scientist blending up some great stuff. I mean, it's really impressive, Tripp. Like Matt said, that you guys are able to take all these different. I mean, just amazing to me that you guys can know how to do this and going for the consistency like this. It just speaks volumes as to your commitment to what you're doing, which is great. So, all right, Matt. So let's move on to the rye. So this is the Stellum rye. Let's do that. So Joe, Tripp, either one of you guys want to tell us a little bit what we got poured up in this rye?
Yeah, Tripp, you're on a roll.
All right, so
this is an easy one for me. It's so good having you on here. It's like you can do the heavy lifting.
So the Stellum rye is going to be primarily the infamous 95.5 rye from Indiana, and it has really become. It's really become sort of when people talk about a rye whiskey, that's what comes to mind. Is that 95.5? It really owns sort of the rye space, but with that traditional nod to what rye whiskey is, we've also sort of layered in some of the Kentucky rye that provides some, in my opinion, some interesting candy note, and I think you'll find that sort of toward the mid palate. But if you guys want to taste it, then we can chat about it.
Sure. Now, just real quick, this one comes in. This is 116.24 proof, right? So this is just a slight bump up over the bourbon. So right a little bit over 116. Matt, what are you picking up over there on the nose?
I pick up like orange. I get oranges. It's like a candied orange on the nose with a little bit of other citrus and like a touch of Thai lemongrass comes through as well.
Yeah,
it's like an earthy lemongrass or some sort of like an herbal flavor, but oranges really come through for me, like a really sweet candied orange.
Yeah, Matt, it was funny because I opened these up. I had saved these bottles because you guys were kind enough to send these to us. We appreciate that, obviously. And I've left them unopened until tonight, despite the fact that I wanted to open them and sample them. I chose not to, but I opened them earlier today and let them breathe just a little bit. I wanted to see them, just get some nosing off of it. And Matt, I agree. The orange, you talked about in the past though, kind of like a Christmas, like a spiced orange at Christmas time. It kind of came across to me as a that sweet candied orange, but there's a spiciness to it. So it kind of made me think of when you talk about the oranges like with the cloves stuck in them. So I kind of picked that up. That was the one thing that stuck out to me really on the nose for sure. But definitely enjoy that one. So
I know.
Wait a second. Hold on. Wait a minute. You just made me think of something. So taste and smell are so evocative of memories. I all of a sudden just got hit with the cloves stuck in pineapples that go on a ham.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what one thing I love about bourbon and rye whiskey in general is the fact that, it just takes you back to these different memories that you have. I think Tripp, the last time you were on, I started talking about Topps bubblegum baseball cards and the fact that I was picking up bubblegum off of one. I think it was batch 21 or 20. I can't remember which one, but but things that kind of flash back into your memory from years ago, that bourbon or rye can really bring out for you, which is really really fun.
I never understood why they put the bubble gum in the cards like that. If it gets too hot, it just really screws up that first card.
I know, it's like stuck to it and it's a mess. It's nasty. Yeah, no doubt about that. So I know Stellum Spirits, when you guys announced it, it was stated that it's to celebrate the modern day whiskey drinker. So I'm curious, what is the definition in your mind? What is the modern day whiskey drinker?
Again, I was talking about it earlier. It's a diverse demographic, but it's somebody that is focused on the simplest way to look at it, it's somebody who's focused on what's in this glass versus what does this look like and what are you telling me? That's really, and it's respect to those drinkers. That's what we're doing. There's a discerning palate. People are more concerned with what they're putting in their body. They want to know more about the products, and we tell them what we can about the products. We're as transparent as we can be on all of these things. But it's really defined by somebody who is really looking for new and different and more experiences. And the other part of it is, I think that they're part of the modern drinker is also represented in the way they eat and food, and it's a willingness to put together different pairings and different things. So it's a nod to all of those things, and that's how we identify the new bourbon drinker as we see it.
I got you. So
I think we have bourbon consumers, and I say we as consumers because I'm a consumer, Joe's a consumer. We appreciate good products, and I think in so many years past, we've been conditioned to focus on bourbon based on the way it looks in the bottle, or the way, a certain proof, or a certain age, or, the writing on the bottle. And while all those things have their place, what we're really focusing on is what's in the bottle.
Right.
And the flavors and the congeners and how they interact in the spirit that's in the bottle, and also that experience that the consumer has when they taste that product. It's more about all of those things than it is about the story that we're trying to tell.
So basically, it sounds like the modern day bourbon drinker is a more, I don't want to say sophisticated, but maybe a more informed consumer. Someone who looks for beyond packaging and beyond stories, and looking for something that's going to hit the right notes for them.
Is that
curious? Somebody who's curious.
Yeah.
I think that's
okay.
I think you got it. Exactly. Okay. That's who we're talking about.
Joe, I didn't get my MBA for nothing, so I can, All right, guys, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break because we're at the end of round 2, but we'll come back and we'll continue our conversation. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be back with more with Tripp Stimson and Joe Beatrice from Stellum Spirits in just a minute. Hey, Bourbon Lifers, we want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about 3 Chord Whiskey. 3 Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the 3 Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels, which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, each small batch blend of 3 Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12-bar reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from 3 Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the 3 Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about 3 Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round, period, session, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my buddy Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Hey, good, Mark. I'm doing great, man. I've made it this far, so you better believe I'm going to stick around for the exciting conclusion.
Yeah.
Because we've got with us Tripp Stimson, the chief whiskey or chief
mad scientist.
Mad scientist and distillery operator, and Joe Beatrice, the founder of Stellum Spirits. And we are back drinking the Stellum Rye So do we want to get right in and start talking about what we're tasting here?
I wanted to talk about these bottles, man, because we've kind of alluded to it and talked about the brand itself and how they, everything's kind of geared towards the new consumer, or not new consumer, but towards the consumer. But man, these bottles, it just catches your eye. So you guys want to talk about that just a little bit? What drove that decision and how you guys came up? I wish, we don't do video. I wish people could see what we're looking at. I'm sure if as long as somebody's not living under a rock, they've seen this on Instagram or social media. They've seen these bottles. But can you guys talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, to echo Mark's point, and not to interrupt before we get to it, I'm glad that you came with a different bottle for this. I feel that the bottle that you use for Barrell Craft Spirits, in my mind at least, every time I see that bottle, I know it's Barrell Craft Spirits. So I'm really glad that Stellum has its own packaging and its own identity that way. So yeah, just let us know what's up with that.
Yeah, we didn't want it to be reliant on Barrell Craft Spirits packaging. Yeah.
Sure.
So the name is derivative of the word stellium, which is Latin for star. And a stellium is a group of stars, a cluster of stars. And, it's sort of, it was the inspiration is for something that was, I grew up as a Cold War baby, and it's like the space was just the thing that was the greatest high, the greatest goal that we could aspire to. And so just that all sort of felt right, felt good. And it also gave us limitless options on names, which is a surprisingly difficult part of this whole process. With Barrell Craft Spirits, when we have new products, coming up for a name for them is very difficult. Because first of all, any name you can come up with, there's a winery named that pretty much across the board.
Oh gosh.
So that's difficult. And so when we do our single barrel, so let me take a quick digression before we get into the packaging. In addition to the two batch products, the two ongoing releases, Just Habit, the two ongoing releases that we have, Stellum Bourbon and Rye, we also do single barrels on both of them. And so we do groupings of barrels, and they're usually named after a cluster or a star, like Cygnus, for example. And that those barrels in that series will have some commonality to it. And then when that's done, we come up with another release and name it something different. So that's sort of in the name, in the background, in the branding, and in the imagery that we used. The packaging, in a way that we wanted to present a product that appealed to what we're calling the modern bourbon drinker, in terms of the formulation of the product, as well as the packaging, we wanted it to be simple. Simplicity. Once again, it's all about what you see in the bottle. Our labels on this product also are on the bottom, so you see the bourbon in the same way as the Barrell Craft Spirits. And we went with almost a minimalist perspective on the design, so that again, the brand became second to the product that's in the bottle. And that's what drives what we do.
Yeah, it's funny because I was looking at the bottles earlier today. I was trying to read the proof. when you get older, it's like, wait, what? And squinting and looking, but it's the name stands out. You see the name, Stellum Rye, Stellum Bourbon. The rye's green, of course. The bourbon is just a beautiful blue labeling on there. You got the beautiful corks on top as well. With that, once you take the wrapper off, it's that nice wood grain. I noticed that. I really think that stands out. The back label, very simple, just straightforward. There's not a whole lot of, like you said, there's not a bunch of story on there. There's just not, the focus is on the bottle. And I think that's another thing that stands out is the coloration. You can see the rye, you can see the bourbon, you see what it looks like. It's just dark and rich looking, and it's inviting. It makes you want to drink it.
And details are important to us. Details of the packaging, and also, we have the cork, as with the wooden stopper underneath it, is the highest quality cork that you can buy, natural cork. It's the highest grade, and we even that we spend more on that just because it's critical. You want to get the best. I feel like you need the best quality packaging so that you never have issues with it. And even with these stoppers, we will still reject some if it's not totally up to par. But it's also, so it'll make a good seal. It'll last for a long time. It won't break off, hopefully. But
Sure.
It's a natural ingredient. But all of these things matter to us. We're critical of what we do and how we put it together.
Well, I remember, from our last session with Tripp, and Tripp, you were talking about the barrel, the labeling, the tags on the label. I mean, how precise you guys were in terms of developing everything and how you want it to be precise. You want it to be exact. You don't want it to be off center. You want everything to look the way that it needs to look. And I respect that. And I think it's great. It speaks volumes to your all's commitment to providing a quality product that's going to be appealing and that's going to catch your eye. And I think this definitely does, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So
the effort that we put into to physically putting the liquid together has to translate to the entire package, because if there's something that doesn't necessarily look like it should on the bottle itself, then the consumer may not pick up that bottle. Yeah. And they never get a chance to experience the liquid. So the attention to detail that we put into putting those blends together translates through the entire packaging process.
Yep. That's great to know. So let's talk a little bit about the process itself. I mean, I know with your different batches that you do with Barrel Craft, obviously you've got a number of barrels you're working with. You put that together, you make a batch, you bottle it, you sell it. That batch is over, you move on to the next batch. This is different. I mean, you're going to be blending to meet that profile that you want. But can you talk about what kind of batch sizes and things that you're working with this? How many barrels are you're doing at a time to make a bottling session?
Can I take a trip?
Yeah,
it's bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
And more frequent.
Yeah, that's good. Again, a good problem to have, right? So
yeah, that's great practice.
Yeah. So we talked about the different mash bills and the 5 different types of barrels that are in the Stellum bourbon and the Stellum rye and the barrels that are involved in those. So sort of the approach to that is, we will have those barrels on hand. We will dump those barrels in proportion and taste as we go. Again, there's shipping components that go into all of this, and getting things from point A to point B when you're coming from multiple places also plays into all of these things. But as we're dumping and tasting, we're doing it stepwise up in our 6,000 gallon blending tanks and making fine adjustments based on flavor. So samples get pulled daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And Joe, Nick, and I, and Will, when he's in town, we'll go through and taste these products and then decide sort of what's missing. And I think that's sort of the key question that I ask myself in trying to create these products, especially when we're creating something that we are targeting consistency, is what's missing here. And we have the baseline. We know what we're looking for. Now the question is, what's missing in this part of the blend, and where do we need to go to find that?
Yeah. And I just can't imagine. I mean, like Matt was talking about earlier, I can't imagine. It's like you got this huge Excel spreadsheet right now and you can look and say, here's the barrel. No, I mean, I just don't know how you do it. I don't know how you say, okay, it needs a little bit of this and we're just going to get this barrel because we know that this is going to add that. That seems absolutely overwhelming to me. So
that's it. And that's really what happens. And also sort of dimensionalize the numbers, because it's really hard to think in these terms. 6,000 gallons equals about 30,000 bottles. Okay. So it's a big tank.
Yeah.
You fill up a lot of bottles with a tank.
Yeah. So do you ever get in that situation where you put 5,000 gallons in and you're like, wow, something's really off here? I mean, does that happen? I mean, do you like, we really need to figure something out on this end, or find this or find that? Does that happen?
Not in the last few years.
So you got it perfected. That's good to know, though. I mean, yeah.
What Tripp was saying is something that I think is a really interesting and good point. If you want to talk more about the step up process, Tripp, how we You want to take
So,
Yeah, it's very easy to go too far. It's very easy to look at something on paper and make all the assumptions that every variable from yeast to mature barrel was exactly the same across all the mash bills, and that when we dump all these barrels, 1 + 1 is going to equal 2 every time. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. It's never that.
Yeah.
So by focusing on groupings of barrels that came from a certain area of the warehouse that might be the same mash bill as another grouping of barrels that came from a different part of the warehouse that are of the same mash bill, same yeast strain, so on and so forth, there's going to be differences in those. So if we can get ahead of the stepwise blending by tasting those groupings and then doing some lab work, some lab blends, and sort of answering the questions of, what is this group going to bring to the table? What's this group going to bring to the table? And try to take 6,000 gallons of blending and cram it into a Glencairn glass and say, is this going to be representative of what we're going to get when we dump all these barrels? And it's sort of the process. And then going too far, if we get to a point where, we've blended, say we blended 6,000 gallons and there's no more room to put anything else in there. And it's just not where it needs to be. Well, we'll pull some out. We'll get rid of some and then decide, okay, what volume or what concentration of certain flavors needs to be there. What barrels do we need to go to get those flavors, and then add back until we get to where we're going.
We don't get rid of it, by the way.
No, we don't throw it away.
The next question.
If you ever need any disposal services, just feel free to give Matt and myself a call.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to come over and and help you guys. So
Literally.
So now you got a team. So it's you and Joe. You got Nick and is it Will?
Will Schragus.
Yeah, Will is our
right.
national. Will runs the sales side of things and also innovation, and he's on the team, but primarily it's the tasting and blending is driven by Tripp, Nick, and me.
I got you. So the three of you all, that is the process. So there's not a different process. Well, I know the process is different in terms of with Stellum, you're going for a profile. With Barrel Craft, you're going for whatever the taste is that you want. But in terms of the actual process of getting to those, is it different for the three of you all working together, or is it? Do you have the same kind of process to do that? Does that make sense?
I would say that the goal is sort of the differentiator.
Okay.
And the tools that we have used in years past to create all of the Barrell Craft Spirits products and the understanding of how the different mash bills and the different congeners and those things work together. We're definitely gonna pull from from that database of experience in order to find the congeners and the different barrels to create the flavor profile that's going to drive the Stellum batches. So the goal, I really think, is the main differentiator, and the process of how we get to that goal is going to be somewhat similar.
Okay.
I think to add on to that, I think, and this is maybe also another dimension of what you're asking, which is, we all have good palates. I think that's sort of the price of entry. How you train them and how you sort of connect those things is just experience and in working together. Also, another thing just that we don't talk about it that much is because it's second nature to us, is we blind taste everything. So we are there's absolutely no bias in what we're blending. And it takes on one level, we work on surfaces that we write on, because if we, from early experience, will blend something and put it down and forget which glass it was or what it was in it. So we learn, you have to write everything down, which we do. But also we're very careful to make sure that when we're tasting that we are doing the shuffle so that we're able to really take out any kind of rational or conscious bias out of the tasting part of it. And this is a learned skill. I mean, you can.
Yeah.
It's like other things that you do in life. You can learn to do it, and it is a replicatable skill. It just happens that we work together really easily and naturally, and we do have different. There are different things that appeal to us and different things that we don't like. And what's interesting is when all those conditions are met, where all the things that we like are there and all the things we don't like are not there. We're pretty good idea that that's done.
So Joe, let me ask you this: if it's 2 against Joe, is it majority rules or is it Joe rules?
No, we actually go until we're all in alignment.
No, that's great. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, and again, just the commitment to the quality of the product that you guys are putting out. There's no doubt.
Unless I really want to. No, it's always unanimous. It always is.
So Matt, let's talk a little bit about the taste on this one. What do you pick up on the rye?
On the rye, right away, I get a nice sweetness that is kind of like honey, but then the spiciness comes through, and I get like a candied ginger.
Oh,
It's got a really it's the sweetness, like
Yep.
the crystallized or candied ginger, but the spiciness that I get from it, it's not so much like a black peppercorn or a savory spice. It's that ginger, that crispness is coming through, and I think the ginger kind of then transfers and lends to a little bit of like a crisp or almost sour green apple. Probably more of the crisp. I don't want to say sour, but like a nice juicy green apple with it, and then the heat and the peppercorn and then that cinnamon come through at the end for a nice long finish. It's got all the great attributes of a rye.
Yeah, man.
I think that ginger is really unique. I really, really like that.
That finish is just keeps kicking. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's no other way to say it, man. It's just like my tongue is just tingling and it just goes on and on.
Cinnamon. Go ahead, Joe.
No, Matt, it's interesting. A couple minutes ago, I think you said lemongrass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because that translates as licorice to me a little bit.
Huh.
And it's sort of that there's that note there. And I had forgotten about it until I just tasted it again. And you said that, you really reminded me. I get a real, like 3/4 of the way, almost to the finish, that licorice note.
Yeah.
But something else I'd like to point out real quick is that is a perfect example of the type of conversation that Joe, Nick, and I have 1,000 times a day, where Matt gets something that is lemongrass and Joe goes, "Oh no, that's licorice." And so it just shows that our palates translate flavor in different ways, different times, different people. There's so many variables involved. But when you have these conversations day in and day out, you start to learn that my seagrass is somebody else's licorice, and there's those things. There's so many examples of things that I might taste, but Joe gets something else. It was just, I wanted to point that example out because those things happen all the time.
And we're only talking about the good. We're talking about the good things. I mean, there are some.
So guys, so we've tasted the cask strength bourbon and rye, but now you guys are also going to you're doing the single barrels as well. Is that correct with the Stellum Spirits? All right. Can you talk about? I know you talked about a little bit about that. Can you talk a little bit more about what the plans are with that? Are those out yet currently or not?
Yes, we release them at the same time. We released this in April, and the idea was to do a national release, and we are rolling national release over a few weeks. And what happened was we put it in the market, and we immediately got reorders. So we then went back, and as Tripp was mentioning, we blended and bottled a lot more than we anticipated initially. And so now it's slowly getting into the stores across the country. It just it takes time to filter from our place to where we consolidate up in New Jersey, and then where the distributors pick up and gets into the store. So that process takes some time. And so we're also doing at the same time we release single barrels in both the bourbon and the rye. And we learned we have a pretty sophisticated single barrel program. We know how to do it because we do it with Barrell craft spirits. And so we figured out a couple of efficiencies in terms of how we do the packaging and the bottlings to get it to the market faster, because we can turn these around depending upon where you are on the cycle from a month, 3 months from when somebody selects it to when it gets into their hands. And so we're making it available to groups, to retailers, to anybody that buys a single barrel. We contact us. We get on the list and we do it. But it's straightforward. We get a couple of selections, and when you find the one that's right for you, we bottle it for you.
So, all right, I guess I was thinking, are you all doing as Stellum Spirits? Are you doing your own single barrel releases, or is it just barrel picks that groups and clubs and restaurants are doing?
No, it's Stellum Spirits.
Okay.
Single barrel bourbon and single barrel rye. I don't have one here. We're not video. We're not doing video anymore. Yeah. So if you would imagine, it looks like this.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Okay, I just wanted to be clear. I wasn't sure on that. I just wanted to make sure. So, and you guys, you're over there in Louisville, correct? That's where you guys are located now. Are you warehousing your barrels and things over there as well in Louisville, or do you have someplace? I mean, you don't have to reveal secret locations, but is everything done there on site with you guys in Louisville?
No, we have our barrels are stashed all over the place. They're in Kentucky, they're in my attic, they're in Tennessee, they're in Indiana, they're in Michigan, Ohio. I mean, we have them located around the country because they're big items to move around, and so we try to move them as infrequently as we can. And so we have, like everything else we do at our facility in Louisville, it's really just in time. We bring in barrels just in time to blend and bottle, and bring the single barrels just in time to bottle. And so we're focused always on what we're doing today and for the next month or so in terms of what we need to have blended. But they're all over the place. It's a logistics. It's a big logistics problem to solve.
I was going to say, I can't imagine. And I was going to say, so it's a just in time process for anybody that's in the business world. They'll understand what that means. But yeah, so
it's just in time, except when it comes to barrels, because you can do just in time and bottles, just in time and everything else. But barrels are, it is, well, we're going to get around to it sometime our target date is next week, but it could be as early as tomorrow or in 3 weeks. So there's a little bit of that's something that we haven't really quite nailed that just in time with the barrels. That operation is still very much a manual. Where is it in the rick house? Oh, we got to move these to get to them. I don't feel like doing it today. So maybe tomorrow we'll get to it.
Yeah. So it's not quite the, I can't remember the guy now. I'm trying to think back to my MBA days in the business school stuff that wrote the book on just-in-time philosophy for Japanese car manufacturers. I can't remember his name, but anyway.
Theory Z, Peterson.
I can't remember. All right. So guys, can people come over and tour your facility? Are you set up for that? Or is it just you guys are there and it's like buy our stuff at the retail outlet?
Well, tourism was never in our model. So we don't do that. We do some sort of industry events where we bring in distributors in a group to taste barrels, but that's really the extent of it. It's a different business. Tourism is a totally different business and not something that that requires different staff, different facility, different. We're in an old data facility. I mean, we have the most unsexy work environment you can imagine.
Nobody wants to tour the factory, right? Nobody wants to come to the factory.
Although it is kind of interesting. It is interesting to see how we make the sausage, but it's not really. No, it's not. We're not on the Bourbon Trail.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, I just want to make sure so our listeners understand that, so they know they know that it's not something they're going to be like, oh, let's go over and check out Barrell Craft Spirits in Louisville. So let's see. Another question. We're getting to the end of our final round here. So the future, just curious, what does that look like for Stellum Spirits? What does it look like for Tripp Stimson and for Joe Beatrice?
Yeah, Tripp, what's it like for you?
It is crazy growth. I mean, it is figuring out how to make the just-in-time system work with the growth. You know, we're blowing out of the space that we're in, trying to figure out additional spaces for processing and additional bottling lines, and just all of the good problems that come with growth the size that we're having. So all good things. Very good.
Yeah. And that's really, I mean, the short answer is everything that we're doing now is what we're going to keep doing, only on a larger scale and at a greater velocity. We're blending as fast as we can.
we're doing the best we can. Everybody bear with us. We're trying. Now, I mean, that's great though. I mean, you guys are obviously committed to this, and you're doing some great stuff. And obviously, Matt, I've enjoyed this rye. Get your final thoughts on that. What do you think?
Come on. Absolutely.
I knew Matt would love it.
No doubt about it.
Matt's a rye guy, and I knew that he would be all over this one. Now, this one, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a double gold winner. Is that right? At San Francisco.
Yes. So this probably should have. I have to get my notes on that. We only enter blind competitions, and I was actually right before we got on. I was trying to grab everything together. So San Francisco, the rye won a double gold, the bourbon won a gold. At John Barleycorn, the rye won a gold and the bourbon won a double gold. And at New York International Spirits, the rye got a double and the bourbon got a gold. So right now it looks like rye is leading 2-1. No, 2-1 on the double.
Yeah,
gold,
on the double gold.
That's got to make you guys feel really good, Tripp. I know we talked about that before, because with Barrell Craft, I mean, geez, oh Pete, man, the batch 21, batch, what was it, Matt, 6 or 7, batch 16 or something. I mean, you guys like bourbon of the year and just killing it. So you're off on a good start on this one. There's no doubt about that, right?
Absolutely. And we're thrilled that people like this product as much as we do. We spent a lot of time developing it and putting it out there. So it's great that it's been so well received.
Yeah. So now I didn't think to ask, but price wise, can we talk about that real quick in terms of the bourbon and the rye? What retail, what we're looking at on that?
Of course, we have no ability to control the price of what is actually charged, but which is how the world works. But the MSRP is $55. So it really comes in between 50 and 60, but 55 is where we're shooting for. And that's not a criticism of anybody. Every state has different tax laws and distribution costs. And so we've been really trying to get it in that price point.
No, I mean, and that's great. That's a great price point. I think it's both of the bourbon and the rye. I think it's a great price point for people that want to jump in and give it a try. I would definitely say that's a sweet spot. Matt, what do you think?
No brainer.
And to make it more complicated, the single barrel is the same price right now.
Oh man. All right.
Why you gotta make it that much harder on us? I'm just.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, guys. So where can people find your products and you all in terms of social media and stuff?
We're working our way through all the states, so we're trying to get in as many doors as possible. We have a store locator. I don't know if we actually have it up on Stellum yet. It was this week. I think it was going up, or next week. So you'll be able to find that. You can buy it online. All of our social media is it's Stellum. And Barrell Crafts and Bourbon Barrell Craft Spirits. It all gets there. We're pretty easy to find.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Well, we are at the end of round 3 here. So any final thoughts, anything you want to wrap up and share with our listeners before we get out of here?
I don't know if there's anything else left to cover.
We've talked you to death, Joe. Sorry about that.
No, this has been a great night. Thank you very much for having us on.
Well, good. Well, we appreciate that. Tripp, as our first bourbon industry repeat guest, man, you're going to go down in the Bourbon Life Hall of Fame, and as the first repeat bourbon industry guest. So,
but Mark, Matt, it's been great. Enjoyed it. And we'll definitely have to do it again. Fantastic.
Yep, definitely will. Matt, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Hey, Tripp, Joe, thank you both so much for sharing Stellum with us and for being on the show. And it's exciting to see the expansion that you all are going through in the future, if not just to keep up with demand, just to make your trophy case a little bit bigger to keep up with all the awards you all are bringing in. So this is really great stuff. And it's nice to see that it brings out the character that you brought with Barrell Craft Spirits, where when the product is so good, you don't need any packaging to hide it behind. It's all right there. You're showing it to us, and it really backs itself up. I appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, definitely. We really appreciate it. Before we wrap it up, though, I want to thank our sponsors. I want the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky. Check them out online, thestavekentucky.com, and also on Instagram and Facebook, the Stave Kentucky. Just making some great food. Chef Kyle Klatka is just doing a great job out there. So stop by and see those guys out there between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon. Want to thank them again for their sponsorship as well. Appreciate all that they do to help us out. So with that said, I'm going to wrap it up and send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.